America, divided about the facts. Journalists are wrestling with how exactly to respond when President-elect Trump, the next leader of the free world, says and tweets things that are just false. Here's something he's been saying for months, including on Thursday at a rally in Pennsylvania.
But we have to be a rich nation again, and we have to be a safe nation. The murder rate in the United States is the largest that it's been in 45 years. Nobody knows that. They don't tell you that. Do you guys ever say that? No, they don't say that. They don't want to hear that.
Listen to those boos. Trump's making this sound sinister, like the press is refusing to tell you about a terrible crime wave. But the reason we in the press don't report it is because it's not true. The murder rate is thankfully at near 45-year lows. Now, it is correct to say, here's the data from Vox, that there has been an increase in the murder rate recently. Between 2014 and 2015, it did tick up percentage-wise. But it's an increase from this relatively low level, much lower than in the 80s or 90s, for example. Now, Trump got this wrong many times during the campaign. What was so interesting about last night at the rally he most recently had in Mobile, Alabama, was that he got it right at first, then got it wrong again. Listen to this.
The murder rate has experienced its largest increase in our country in 45 years. Think of it, the murder rate. More people are being murdered than in 45 years. And the press never tells you that. Do they ever write that? No.
So he got it right at first, but then said more people are being murdered than in 45 years, which is completely untrue. All of this raises a real problem for journalists. How do you cover a say-anything president? Joining me now, Angie Dronikolen, the editor of PolitiFact, Jane Hall, a journalism and media studies professor at American University, and Jeffrey Toobin, CNN's senior legal analyst and staff writer at The New Yorker. Angie, I'm so interested in this one specific example of a falsehood. It's important, I think, to drill down and just find one we can talk about that's very specific. I know that he's keeping you very busy at PolitiFact. What do you believe journalists should be doing trying to get the facts out there when Trump will repeat something like this again and again?
Well, this is something we've noticed him doing through most of the 2016 campaign. I would say by now we're somewhat used to it. And the approach that we take is we write our reports. We focus on correcting misinformation. So when we are fact-checking something, we focus in on what's wrong and we say why it's wrong. Now, we can note that he said it right a few seconds ago, but this other thing is wrong. And the other thing that we focus on is the overall impression that an average viewer would get. And I think in this case, the average impression they'd get is that crime rates are worse than they've been in 45 years, and that's not right.
What do you recommend, Jane, to your students at American University? What do you recommend to journalists watching this program wrestling with this problem? Because like, on one hand, it's simple, right? You correct him every time he says something wrong. On the other hand, it's actually quite difficult. It's hard to do in copy when you're writing a story. It's hard to do on television when he's live. What do you recommend?
Well, you know, I have former students who are covering Donald Trump. And I think they've done some very good work. So this is real to me. And certainly calling out reporters and calling them scum and all of that is also real. I think what you have to do and what journalists have to do is put the facts in the story. For example, his cabinet appointments, to say the man that he wants to run the EPA is a person who's been suing the EPA. And you let the reader decide. I mean, that is the biggest chestnut of reporting, but it is true. I do think that one thing that journalists need to think about not doing is retweeting his every tweet. We are not supposed to be a tweet deck for Donald Trump. And I think that sometimes people get into the idea of they have to contradict immediately what he just said that's not true. And there's value to that. But I think sometimes we need to point out, A, we need to not necessarily retweet and talk about on every talk show what he just said, because that plays totally into his hands. The thing that I think we maybe want to say sometimes is we are doing this job because we are to be a force for the American people. He has so demonized the press that I think that is a very dangerous thing to do. We need to point out the facts, but we also need to point out, hey, we're there for you, not just because we want to go to watch Donald Trump have dinner with Mitt Romney. We're there to do a job for the American people. Somehow he's been very successful at saying something other than that.
I was going to pull up a tweet next, but I'll skip that for now. I mean, Jeffrey Toobin, we're talking about this dynamic here. Ultimately, it's about alternate realities, people accepting an alternate reality, not caring if Donald Trump gets these facts wrong. Do we in the media world come across as too high and mighty sometimes, talking about this issue?
Well, I think we are widely disliked. I think that's something that really, is very much part of the story. It is no coincidence that, Donald Trump gets cheers when he points to the press, as he did at virtually every campaign rally. And, I am a lowly reporter. I don't know how to persuade people that we are not as horrible as Donald Trump says he is. All we can do is keep telling the truth. And if people don't like it, ultimately that's going to, we're a business and people are not going to read us. They're not going to watch us.
Well, viewing this as a former prosecutor, is he prosecuting a case against the press essentially?
I don't think so. Donald Trump is a politician who was trying to get elected, and he found a vehicle to do it. And one way he ran that vehicle was with attacks on the press, which turns out to be very popular with his base. Also, I don't think we should overstate the problem. I mean, people who attend Donald Trump rallies are not the United States of America. Hillary Clinton got 2.5 million more votes than he did. People are still watching the news. People are still reading the news in one form or another. So it is not the entire country that has turned against the news media, but there is no doubt that we have a problem with a very significant group of people.
A problem in terms of trust, but Angie was suggesting that when someone repeats something enough times, like for example, the murder rate's at a 45-year high, that a lot of folks start to believe it's true. That's not a problem in credibility for the press. That's a problem in the communicator, in this case, President-elect Trump.
Well, and all we can do when he says that is say that it's not true. And it is not our job, I think, to insist that people believe us. I mean, we're not in a contest. We're not running against Donald Trump. All we can do is tell the truth. And when he says thousands of people were cheering, Muslims were cheering after 9/11 in New Jersey, we said it was false. It continues to be false. But if people believe it, we can't grab them by the collar and say, don't do that. We can only use the tools at our disposal.
Trump, of course, communicating emotionally. Jane, let me show you the reason I was originally thinking about this issue this week. Trump's been communicating emotionally throughout the campaign and now throughout the transition. Journalists are generally trained not to communicate emotionally, to keep our emotions out of it. And so his emotional messages do